Hey guys, it's Peggy Dean. In this tutorial, we are going to be walking through painting a floral bouquet with actual tea. And you're going to be using your tea bags. So without further ado, let's just jump right in. So I'm making my tea and I want to recommend grabbing several different kinds because that will give you the options, like hopefully some options with color or just maybe just some different shades. So I have this Sweet and Spicy by Good Earth. I've got this Passion Fruit by Hawaiian Islands Tea Company, Twinings English Breakfast, and Stash Organic Chai. So I'm going to open these up, and I have 2 bags for each one because I want to make sure that it really steeps so that I've got a lot of color in there. So I'm going to place them in each jar and then pour water over them and let them steep, and then I am going to get to painting with them. And then let those steep for about 5 minutes or so. I'm actually not going to end up removing the bags. I'm going to keep them in there so that they get as much color as possible. Once your tea has been steeping for a while, now is the time to swatch them. So I grabbed a scrap piece of watercolor paper that I'm just going to swatch these to see what kind of strength I have in color and to see what color actually turned out, if they're similar, if they're all the same. So if it helps you to have the tea bags in front of you so you know which is which, awesome. If you don't want to do that, get rid of them. You also always have, unless you take the bags out, you have the references right here on their tags. Okay, so I'm going to dip into my first tea, and I like to go pretty far because I want to make sure that I'm getting the actual pigment. So I kind of press around on the tea bag itself, and then I'm going to do my first swatch. So this is a nice light wash, and when this dries, you can always layer to darken. So I'm doing my first wash here. I'm going to see once that dries what happens if I overlay more. So now I'm going to go on to my next one. This will be the chai. So see, this is very, very similar. If it matters to you, there is a slight difference in the tone. It's a little bit lighter and cooler, and this one's a little warmer. It's very barely noticeable, but it's enough that it might make a difference to some of you. This is my English breakfast. This one has a lot more warmth to it, as you can see. And then I'm gonna try this passion fruit. Okay, so this one's super cool as well. So just different tones. So that swatching is a great idea so that you can see exactly what you're working with and how you might want to apply them, or if you want to use one or all, it's all up to you. They do have teas out there that are, they have a lot more color and vibrance to them, like berry teas and things like that. I'm all about working with what you have, and this is what I had, so currently on hand, so that's what I am going with. And from there, I'm going to show you how to create a really pretty piece using just tea. So I'm going to let these dry, and then I will show you what layering on them will look like. Once your first layer is dry here, you're just going to jump right back in. And I usually do this only on part of the swatch because I want to see the comparison with adding one layer versus just that initial layer, and what difference it's going to make in tone and what I should build up and how. So I'm just going to do that on half of my swatch. Make sure that it's saturated enough. And I'm just pushing onto the actual tea bag. Okay, so now that that's done, I'm going to let that dry, and then I'm going to assess and see where I want to go from here. You can see once that is dry, it really pumps the color in and makes that a lot more pigmented. So that will be fun to play with as we create our final piece. Now that we know how these colors are treating us, we can use that as a reference nearby, but I am going to take this opportunity to show you a really pretty way to create a floral painting using tea. And this is going to be very simple and straightforward, and the same rules apply when you are using your brush as you would with paint. Your brush strokes remain the same. That might be a no-brainer, but I like to mention it just in case. So I am probably isolating my paint colors to 2 because I don't want them to get too lost, and I know that I can use multiple layers to build up. So I'm going to start with my flower, the base of my painting, and I'm actually going to use my lighter color. I'd usually use my more, like the color that really pops for the flower the most, but I think I'm going to change that to my leaves. So I'm using this Good Earth, it's an herbal tea, as my flower base, and this one's one of my lighter colors. So I'm going to start off by just creating a little cradle. I'm just setting my brush down full pressure and picking it back up. So it's just creating this little cradle, and then I'm going to create some small marks just above that, leave a little white space, and then a little bit larger above that, make sure to leave some white space in between. And this isn't going to work like watercolor, so you're going to have more pools of water than you would if you were using watercolor, so don't let that freak you out. It's going to dry over time. It just takes a minute, and when it dries, it leaves some really interesting marks on the paper. The next one, I'm going to just create just a large wash area. So I'm applying pressure to my brush. I could also draw this in and fill it in, but the main thing to keep in mind is that you're leaving white space, and if you don't a little bit, just make sure you do on the next petal. So I'm just wrapping this around and letting it grow, and then as it moves outward more, I'm not having it be as pigmented, which means that I will be going back into the center to add another layer so that it really stands out. Okay, so once you have this part done, if you feel like you need a little more or less white space, it's always easier to fill in more than take away. So I'm gonna fill this in a little bit so my white space decreases, but it doesn't go away. I just don't want it to be such wide open spaces. All right, that looks good to me. So I'm gonna do another one just underneath, and it's the same thing. So I'm going to create a little cradle, 2 little petals where they're kind of narrower at the bottom and the top, and then, okay. If that happens, you can either leave it and use it as a part of your painting, or you can pick it up with a paper towel just by dabbing it, and then it should take it all the way up. You might have a little tea stain there, but I think that's part of the charm. All right, so yes, narrower at the bottom and top, and then wider on the sides, and then just a couple little marks that act as the center of the flower because they're tighter. They're a tighter bloom right there. And then I'm going to open that up with 2 more, and then just create a little bit wider petals that open up more all around the center that I initially created. Okay, that looks good to me. And then I might do another one right here. Actually, yeah, I'm gonna do a bud that's kind of opening up. So it's not quite open all the way yet. So to do that, the same cradle that I made with the 2 marks, I'm gonna make them a lot narrower. So they're gonna be kind of inward, and see how they're touching, which is totally fine. And then I'm just going to create C-curve strokes around that, and then just a little bit of texture at the top, and that's it. And that creates my bud. I might actually increase the length though. There we go. Okay, and I like texture, so I kind of piece this out a little bit because I think it just looks like it's opening up more. I'm gonna let that dry before I go back in with more tea. You can see if it has a lot of tea on there, it might push to the side. If you don't wanna let that dry all the way because you're afraid that it might pool up with pigment, you can always take just a real thin part of your paper towel and just don't set it all the way down, but just set it against the liquid, and it will soak some of that up. So just do that lightly. It's optional, but then it won't pool as much. Okay, once I have that done, just like watercolor, anywhere that I put another stroke of anything, if it's wet, everything's gonna kind of bleed together. So if you wanna start on your leaves, which is what we're doing now, you can just make sure there's some separation unless you are okay with having it bleed into the next part. So I'm using my passion fruit, my passion tea. It's a little warmer, so I'm gonna make sure these are separated. While I love when colors bleed together, I just think that for this, it would make more sense to be standalone since the tones are so similar. So to create my leaves, I'm gonna do a full pressure on my brush and then lift up to the tip. So full pressure, and then I'm lifting up as I get toward the tip. You're not really seeing the pigment as much yet, but you will when you start layering. I'm gonna do that again right here. So these are like peekaboo leaves. They're just poking out from the back. And then I can do stems if I want to. I don't always, but I like to do stems. Bring that up, okay. And then I can create leaves coming off of that. So see how it's here? It's probably gonna run into this flower, so I can just stop right before it does. Keep some separation. You can fill it in later or just leave the white space. It looks good either way. I'm gonna do another leaf coming off here, but I'm gonna stagger it so it actually starts lower. So I might even bring my stem a little bit lower. And then full pressure up, light pressure into the tip. Full pressure, light into that tip. I'm gonna add some more pigment in there, which will make it so it takes a lot longer to dry, but I want that deeper wash underlayer to start this one. Okay, so I might throw just another leaf behind this area here. So I can do a stem coming off lower and then just kind of hiding a little bit behind this flower. And then I can have that leaf kind of reach right here. There we go. And then if you want to, something that I find really fun with these types of bouquets is just to add some little twigs because it adds some interest. So with the very tip of your brush, take any color that you'd like. I mean, really, these are all very similar. And looking at this, I don't see a difference yet, which would also be totally fine. But I'm gonna come up here with the tip of my brush and just drag a couple really small, real skinny lines. And if it's not pigmented enough, once they're there, you can go back in with more pigment, just set it down in that spot and it'll bleed into those lines you created. And then I'm just gonna do little balls at the top of that. So it's just a little more interest. I'm gonna do it right here. I don't want a ton of water on my brush yet. And then come back in and just put some little balls on the top. And looks like this leaf is mad at me, so I'm gonna bring it thicker. There we go. Okay, and then I might just add some sprigs coming off of the center of the stem. Maybe even just one. Yeah, so see how that just kind of balances it out. So I'm gonna let this dry all the way, which is going to take forever, but for you, it will take 2 seconds because I'm gonna fade right into it, but we're gonna go in and add some extra layers to emphasize exactly what we want. All right, so now that this is dry, I can kind of see how the tones are different. While this is just the first coat, you can see that my leaves have a little more warmth and a little more depth to them, and my flowers are a little lighter. So I'm using the same 2 colors. I'm just gonna move the other ones out of the way because I'm not using them. And then I'm gonna go in and I'm just gonna add some more tea to the areas that I want to enhance, which are the centers of these flowers. Make sure you have plenty on your brush, and it might look a little bit strange because they're, they're pools, but you can see that they dry flat. And I'm just gonna do this to mainly the inside. I'm not really gonna drag this out to the outer petals, maybe just slightly at the base, but that's it. I want this concentration to be in the center. Do the same thing through here. Just at the center to create depth. And then I'll do the same thing to my leaves, probably just at their base. And you can always go back in and add a third or a fourth coat, which I am gonna do because I love to layer and have that depth, but that's up to you if you want to. So I'm just gonna drag that through right here. You can see I'm splattering all over the page. I like splatter. If you don't, just be a little more gentle with your brush and you're probably not gonna run into the same problem that I have. But adding a lot more pigment to the leaves will really bring that tone, that warm, pretty tone out that I want to show up there. I think just because this is so sporadic, I might pick a few of these up. Know too that tea, while it can be wet here, it's also staining. It stains, so you want to be careful about where you let water sit too long. Okay, so that looks good to me. I'm gonna let that second coat sit and then see where we're at when that dries. You can see here that once the second layer dries, it can pool like this, which I think is really fun. It is because it had basically like a puddle on top of the paper, but it just adds more of an organic feel, which I like. But if you don't want that to happen, when it's about halfway dry, if you take a paper towel and just blot it, it will soak up all that liquid, but because tea has that staining property, it'll still lie and still have the color in there. So I'm just gonna do this do one more round of this, and I'm just gonna clean up these edges just a bit because I was a little bit sloppy with my second coat. So it might not look like it's doing the trick, but it is. It is enough to notice anyway. So I'm just covering that, and this is gonna darken it even more, which I like. So see what I mean when I say, like, normally I would have the flowers be the main focus with the bolder color, but I think that in this case, because of the delicate colors with tea, the delicate colors and shades in the flowers is what really will stand out there. Or, I mean, look, you know, delicate and nice. So I like that. Okay. Once that's done, I'm gonna hit the flowers one more time. I think I actually might also go over these stems one more time. Okay, and then in the center, I'm going back to that first color that I had, and I'm just going to apply some more, but just in the center this time. I know before was the center, but I kind of expanded just a little bit. This one is going to be even smaller, as you can see. And then I'm just gonna let those sit and dry. And so see this effect here where it has the darker edges, it's gonna do the same thing, but where you place it now. So I kind of try to place it offset so it's not in the exact spot, just for that added organic feel. So we'll see what that looks like once it dries. But the very last thing that I like to do, I know I mentioned that I love to add splatter, and I'm gonna do it. So I'm just gonna take some tea on my brush. I'm just gonna hold, more cat hair. I'm just gonna hold my brush over the top and just tap it. And you can see I am creating splatter. Like that. Just a fun, organic feel. So you can see that I am completely finished. My painting is dry, and I can say that I have a really fun piece that I have created from nothing but tea bags. You can see that there is a progression, so if you want less layering and have it look even more delicate, you can do that, or you can take it all the way for some extra depth. The other part that I want to challenge you to do is a huge next step. So if you love painting with tea, you can try painting with actual tea bags. So all you gotta do is take them out, squeeze them out so that it's not super saturated with water, and drag directly onto the paper. So that's a fun challenge. I challenge you to do that. And if you guys like this video, please be sure to thumbs up and subscribe, and I will see you next time.